So last week, at the end of class, we'd gotten through the reading of Romans chapter 12. We had talked about, in verse 20, therefore, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him a drink. In so doing, you'll heap coals of fire on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. We looked at how this went back to the Old Testament, to Proverbs 25:21. And all of these things that he's talking about, well, I'll back up for a minute. What is the change from Romans 11 to Romans 12? First 11 chapters deal with what? Ryan?
The
Doctrine. And then chapter 12 going forward, practical applications. And from verse 9 on through 19 and even before that, there are so many things that are just like one sentence sermons. And in Romans chapter 12, I have a little outline here. In verse 3, he's talking about humility and thinking, and these are expectations. So when God wants us, as Paul is telling them in verse 1, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And then these things here are some of the ways that we present ourselves a holy sacrifice acceptable unto God. We have to have humility in thinking. We esteem others better than ourselves. There's usefulness that we need to be engaged in. We need to have love. We need to have brotherly love. What's the difference between love and brotherly love? In verse 9, let love be without hypocrisy, abhor what is evil, cling to what is good, be kindly affectionate to one another with brotherly love, and honor, giving preference to one another. What's the difference between love and brotherly love? David?
I'm thinking here, love shown to the world and love shown to the brethren.
Okay. And that's a good differentiation. And there can be love in all things. We show love to the world, and we show love to our brothers.
I'll say your example from last week. I mean, same thing. I had 3 brothers, so you fight and all that, but at the end of the day, you're still there for each other. Love can just be short-sighted, worldly type stuff. But brotherly love, have the biggest fight, but some happen.
And so, yeah, some love people or brethren conditionally, and I'll love you to this point, and then they don't love anymore. But brotherly love, we might argue and fight with one another, but then we forget it, and we're the best friends. Brotherly love, it's a stronger type of love. Be kindly affectionate to one another with brotherly love, in honor, giving preference to one another. We talked briefly about zeal, not lagging in diligence. What did I say is one kind of Christian that you cannot be? Lazy. A lazy Christian is a contradiction in terms. Not lagging in diligence, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord. Rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation. What does this?
When we're talking about the brotherly love, I always think of Philemon and Paul. That's where I think we really see
Right.
brotherly love, if we read that and think about what we're reading.
Right. Yeah, and I think you brought that up last week, and that's a good example. So rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation. What does this mean? How are we patient in tribulation?
I
David?
was thinking that was like we're long suffering with people, but we're patient with trials or things that go on in the world, and that all kind of goes together. If we're doing all these things, we're going to go through tribulation. We're going to go through this, and if we are not patient, it kind of undoes all of these things. So by keeping these things in mind.
Okay. How are we to respond to tribulations?
Differently than we used to.
Differently than we
Instead of
used to?
getting angry, we're supposed to say, what are we supposed to learn from this?
What are we supposed to learn from this? That's good. So rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulations, continuing steadfastly in prayer. So somebody else, how are we to respond to tribulations?
Like it's a blessing to us.
Like it's a blessing to us? Let me ask it this way, do we give in, cave into the tribulation and just throw our hands up and give up? You feel like that sometimes? Is that what we are to do when we have tribulations? What are we to do? We're to be patient in tribulation. That means we bear up under the tribulations. Whatever tribulation we are facing, we are patient knowing that God is not going to give us more than we can handle. And when we bear up under that, then we are going to be able to handle the next thing that comes along. And can we get through a lot of our tribulations on our own? What do we need?
God.
We need God and we need each other. We need God and we need each other, and we help each other. And that's what Paul wrote to the Galatians about bearing one another's burdens. And that can be talking about sin, that can be talking about tribulations. If a brother needs help, a sister needs help, we help them, we bear one another burdens. You aren't going through this alone. And then there are some burdens that we cannot handle, and what do we do with those? Give them to God. Jim?
That's what I was going to say.
Okay. Steadfastness in prayer. What does steadfastness in prayer mean? Jim?
Constantly stay in the truth.
Constantly stay in the truth, constantly praying, continuing steadfastly in prayer. We make it a habit, a way of life. Generous and hospitable. Somebody comment on those. Jim?
Help those that need help. You know, if they'll let you, help those that are weak in the Word, and help them study and meditate upon the truths that they understand.
Okay. That's a good point. Somebody else? What else can it be? Code?
When I see that, I think of just how God has blessed me and how I should share with others what He has blessed me with. You know, everything we got comes from God, and you know, He doesn't want us to be stingy with what He gives us.
I was just going to ask a question and you took my word. How many people here has God been stingy to? God hasn't been stingy to any of us. He has blessed us so richly, tremendously. And when we help others or each other, whatever it may be, we shouldn't have the mindset, what's the least that I can do in giving, like, I don't want to have to do any more than what I have to do. God is very generous, and again, Christ was generous, and he set the example for us.
God loves a cheerful giver.
God loves a cheerful giver. Did you have something else, Jim?
No,
Okay. Forgiving. Verse 14. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Is it easy to bless those people that persecute us? No. Why are we told to bless them? What's when we bless someone that persecutes us, what is that going to change in us?
Like a better heart.
Yeah, it's going to change our heart. It's going to change our heart. If we don't bless them, if we don't forgive them, then we have an unforgiving heart, and what's that going to do to us? We're not going to be forgiven. It's just going to eat us alive.
I had a hard time forgiving certain people, and I won't mention no names, but it took me a while to do that. I got over it.
And that's probably true with all of us. Some people easier to forgive, maybe some situation, somebody will mention something and we'll say, oh, I forgot all about that. And somebody, you just get around somebody and they don't even say something to you, and you bring up something from the past.
Yeah, I was just thinking of these are not only the divine expectation for us, these are what we are expected to do as Christians, but these are the best principles for living a long and happy life in this life. Like, you think about people, I've had interaction with people that are older, that are bitter and angry people, and they have, this is just, anecdotal, but they have health problems, they have twisted faces, they're just really, their bodies have reacted to the years of anger and non-forgiveness and all these things that they demonstrate. So it's not only, it's like these are the things for living a happy life in this life, or the best life you can.
And speaking of older people come to my mind. You visit them or have interaction with them, and some old people that have every reason in the world to complain, and you talk to them and they're just like a ray of sunshine, and you leave feeling better than when you went there. And then there are other people that have not dealt with life the right way, and they're full of bitterness and complaining, and it's like you can't wait to get away from them. Like David said, these are just gems of good living that will bring honor to God and bless our lives. Compassion in verse 15, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. How do we show compassion? Jim?
Be a helpful person for one thing. That's how you show brotherly love and love to others.
Okay. Okay, you want to help them? If we got a letter from somebody on the other side of the world and they said that they mentioned 2 or 3 bad things that have happened to them, how are you going to feel toward them?
Compassion. Empathy.
Any other comments? Okay, let me think of that, and then think of your next door neighbor or someone in your family tells you the same problems that this person had. Are you going to feel the same toward both of them?
Feel more for the ones that are closer.
You're going to feel more for the ones you're closer to. And if you don't get close to people, my point is, if you don't get close to people, you aren't going to have compassion. And you see so many people, they just live like they have a wall around them. They want to open up. They want to engage with people. They don't get personal with people. And there's not going to be compassion. Did you?
I was thinking the compassion part, I think I believe it's James that was talking about, what good is love if somebody tells you and you're just like, be well and, be warm and well fed, but you don't see to their needs. It builds upon these other things, being generous and hospitable, and is generous with time, is generous with energy I spend.
And it's when you say it builds upon these other things, this reminds me of what Peter says, add to your faith, and he goes through a bunch of different things, and it's like you're baking a cake and you add this ingredient and that ingredient and another one, and then the sum of it is different than all the individual ingredients. If somebody said, here, you want to eat this egg, you want to eat this flour, you want to drink this, that's different than somebody saying, you want to eat this piece of chocolate cake, because the sum total is different. Jim?
Jesus, he loved everybody. And when we went to the cross, they hated him. We went to Christ, said, what did he say on the cross? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
Right.
So he loved it. He loved it.
And so you see some people, and it's sad, but they don't see love when they're growing up in a home. They don't see love. They may see the exact opposite. They may see coldness. They may see abuse, but they don't see love. You can visit some congregations, and you don't see love. You don't see abuse, but you might feel coldness. You got to have compassion, again, because that's what Christ had. And when you have compassion, you can forgive anybody, because that could be me that did what that person did. And sometimes that was me that did what that person did. Did you have another comment, Jim? Okay. Do not think you are better than others. Be of the same mind toward one another. Do not set your mind on high things, but associate with the humble. Do not be wise in your own opinion. Any comments on that one? We just need to realize we're all the same. Don't be impressed by somebody with a number of degrees, or if you have a number of degrees, don't think you're better than somebody else.
I've thought about that recently with just I went to a doctor recently, and the doctor, I'm pretty certain, was much younger than I was. You know what I mean? And I thought to myself, I know more than this young man, but then I had to stop and think, like, well, this young man has gone to school for this, I'm going to listen to what he has to say about what I was dealing with. And so it's, spiritually speaking, I'm going to run into the same thing, where there's going to be younger people that are going to have opinions, ideas, and I'm going to have to temper what I think as I get older, and be compassionate and not think that just because I'm older, I'm better.
And sometimes when it comes to religion, and even if we do know more than the other person, something that I've learned to say when there's an opportunity, somebody's saying what they believe, and you just say, well, that's interesting. Help me to understand why you believe that. And that'll open a conversation. I can't read that in my Bible. Where's the verse for that? Because again, a lot of times it's man's wisdom and not God's wisdom.
I would have a problem sitting around with somebody who thought they was better than me. A big problem.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care who he is, if he's rich, poor, or whatever, if he did that. And you can detect a person like that thinks he's better than somebody else.
You can, and some of the people that I knew in years past had a lot of money, but if you met him, you wouldn't think that at all. You wouldn't know that. They just seemed like it's the person that lived next door. And then you have others that are in debt so much and have all the flashy, showy things, and well, I'm better than you because look at what I have. Do not think you're better than others. In 17 through 21, be peaceable. Do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. So we do not want to strike back at somebody. Verse 21, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And again, that's harder to do than to just say it, but the more we do it, the easier it is to do it. Okay, so this list of things in chapter 12 that we need to implement in our lives. Chapter 13, he gets in to living submissively. In chapter 12 through 15, this is a life dedicated to God. Chapter 12 was living sacrificially. Chapter 13 is going to be living submissively. 14 and 15, living sensibly. And then 14 and 15, principles of Christian liberty. So living submissively. Verses 1 through 7, submit to authority. 8 through 10, show love to one another. 11 through 14, sleeping saints should awake. Now, in chapter 13, let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. So what is he going to start talking about in chapter 13?
That there's no power but of God.
Okay, that's
Authorities.
government. That's the word I'm looking for, government. The other things are right, but government, he's going to talk about government. What are some things, in real short answers, what are some things that come to mind in the New Testament about government? Ryan? Paying taxes. And we're going to get into that in this chapter.
I was thinking persecution, first century knew
Persecution.
persecution.
Code?
Honoring your government because they've been appointed from God for what they're doing.
Okay. Honor. Can you think of instances where people are involved, where the government is involved in the New Testament?
Jesus being arrested.
Jesus being arrested? Carol?
Paul, when he was in prison.
Paul in prison? Code?
I was thinking of Paul when he was standing before the King Agrippa, and all he paid tribute to him for their position in government, and he thanked them for the opportunity to speak.
Okay.
before
So
God.
he recognized it?
Why is the government helping all these people that won't work? And we know some of them are not able, but the majority of them we see are driving a new car or something up there into a food line,
Okay.
getting food and all that.
Okay, we can get to that, but we're still laying out what is recorded in the Bible about government. So these are a couple of things that come to my mind. Luke 16:15, Matthew and Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon called the Zealot. What was a zealot? A sect of Judaism that wanted to do what?
Destroy the Romans, get rid of the Romans.
To overthrow the Roman government. That was one of the sects. We think of the Pharisees, the Sadducees. There were Essenes, there were Zealots, there were other sects, and they wanted to overthrow the government. In Mark 15:7, and there is one named Barabbas who was chained with his fellow rebels. They committed murder in the rebellion. When is this talking about? What time do we read about Barabbas? Code?
He did insurrection against the government, uproar.
Okay, and what time, where do we read about him? What was going on when his name is mentioned? Where does he pop up?
Trial of Jesus.
At the trial of Jesus. At his trial, there was one named Barabbas who was chained with his fellow rebels. They committed murder in the rebellion. So this is another rebellion against who? Against the Romans, against the Roman government. Did you have a...
I was just thinking, they would have known what rebellion, I don't think we know exactly the rebellion that's being mentioned, but being that was written to the Romans, they would have known what was being talked about with Barabbas, and Barabbas was accused of all the things that, Barabbas was guilty of all the things Jesus was accused of.
Okay, and who wanted to release Barabbas? The Jews. So what does that tell you about the Jews? They hated Jesus. They hated Jesus more than they hated this man that was chained with his fellow rebels that committed murder in the rebellion. This man, this murderer, and he's chained with these other people, and they hated Jesus more than him and said, crucify Jesus. Acts 21:37. Then as Paul was about to be led into the barracks, he said to the commander, may I speak to you? He replied, can you speak Greek? Are you not the Egyptian who some time ago stirred up a rebellion and led the 4,000 assassins out into the wilderness? So here, Paul is mistaken as a rebel that led 4,000 assassins out into the wilderness. So what relationship do you see between the Jews and the Romans? David?
So the Jews were the rebels to the Romans very often. But it's interesting, whenever we see the Romans throughout the life of Christ and Paul and everything, they are following the law as established. They're respectful of their commanders and their leaders and things like that. And they understand authority. And those are very often the lessons that the Christians weren't. They weren't being submissive to the authorities.
They weren't being submissive to the authorities. Now, when we get into chapter 13, we're going to see the role that government plays, and we're going to see that what Paul says our response to it should be. Was it Paul's first choice to use the government to correct a wrong?
Now, he would tell the brethren to figure out among yourselves, don't take it to the law.
Where would he do that?
I think it was in Corinthians.
Second opinions.
Second Corinthians.
In Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 6:1. Dare any of you, having a matter against another, go to law before the unrighteous and not before the saints? So Paul recognized the Roman government as unrighteous, as heathen, but it was a government instituted by God. But he said, he writes to the Corinthians, you should be able to work out these matters yourself without getting the government involved. Did you have something, Nat?
No.
I thought you were. Okay. Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God, the powers that are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power resisteth the ordinance of God, and they have that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. Caesar Augustus was the founder of the Roman Empire and its first emperor, ruling from 27 BC until his death in 14 AD. Why should Paul stop at this point to urge the Christians to obey civil government? Perhaps it was his concern that the Christians would rebel when persecuted and even reject civil government as having no authority over Christ's kingdom. Therefore, Paul wanted to verify that governmental authority is to be regarded as a divine arrangement. As a general rule, governments function for the good of the people. So, this point, maybe Paul was thinking that the Christians are going to rebel against the government. How did that play out?
Last thing we learned in the history class of the Maccabean revolt, and they were wiped out. The Jews, when they tried to revolt, they were destroyed by the Romans. So it's like the Christian's role is to obey the government when it doesn't oppose God's word, because God instituted them. And so what the Jews were doing at the time were, no one should have rule over us but us, and trying to revolt, and they were getting wiped out.
Okay, let me ask you another question. What does God do with governments? He puts them in, he takes them out. He uses them for whatever purpose he wants to bring about. Just like with Pharaoh and the Egyptians and the Israelites, with the Romans, he used the Roman government to destroy Jerusalem. You see God, but the government itself is ordained by God. So what are the three organizations that God ordained or appointed? That's another word, appointed. What are the three organizations? Is that your hand up? Yes. What was the first?
The family.
The family. What was the second? Government. What was the third? The church. Those institutions are ordained by God. The home, the government, and the church. And he has laws for each of those institutions. And when the home, when the government, when the church follows those laws, what is God going to do? He's going to bless it. When they don't follow those laws, what's going to happen? It's going to be bad. And that, we'll get to your answer, but I want to lay some other things out. But you think back to the Roman Empire. Why did the Roman Empire fall? Why did the Roman Empire fall?
They couldn't get along. They were jealousy and envy. Everybody wanted power.
Any,
Killing for it.
David?
I think because they rejected God, they were like persecuting the Christians, they killing Christians, persecuting the way.
There's a code.
The Roman Empire fell because they fought against God and God's, the church. So
Okay.
that was why they fell.
And I'll try to find for next week. If I get this written down. I've seen 2 or 3 different places. There's a list of about 5, 7, or 10 things that most historians credit for the fall of the Roman Empire. Their family structure was destroyed. It was men living with multiple women, living with children. The whole family structure fell apart. As was mentioned, they ignored God. They had a heavy tax burden on everyone. They overextended their military. And it's like everything that you see going on in this country, like what you mentioned, is like parallels what was happening back then. And righteousness exalts a nation, and sin is a reproach.
Another thing we need to think about when we are studying Romans is laws are made for us, and they're also made for everybody. Those laws cover everyone. And if you break that law, you sinned against God. That's what
Right.
you've done.
And Paul's going to lay that out in the verses here.
People need to realize laws are not just, they're made for us, yes. They're made to protect us, but they're also made for other people.
Right.
Keep things in order.
And so many times we think that we are the center of the universe, and there's some joke like, how many egotistical people does it take to screw in a light bulb? It only takes one. They hold the light bulb up and wait for the world to revolve around them. And that's what so many people think, all of that's for somebody else, not me.
And I think that in this chapter is a good chapter for us today, because there's a lot of Christians you would talk to that believe that there is a role that a Christian has in changing the government, almost as like trying to get it to be something outside of God's control, in a sense, like that we should have a Christian nation and those kinds of topics. And it's like, we should have laws. The best laws are the laws that are modeled after God's principles, certainly. But there is no such thing as a Christian, like they think of the Jews at the time being God's chosen people, a nation of God's people.
Christian is a noun, not an adjective.
Yes.
And so how do we change the world? As Christians, how do we change the world?
Living
One person at a time. So Christians need to apply these verses to themselves today. Acts 23:5, then said Paul, I know not, brethren, that he was the high priest, for it is written, thou shalt not speak evil of the ruler of thy people. So this is talking about paying respect. 2 Peter 2:10, but chiefly them that walk after the flesh in the lust of uncleanness and despise government. Presumptuous are they, self-willed, and are not afraid to speak evil of dignities. Let's get a few more verses in the reading here. I'll start back at verse 1. Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good, but to evil. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For he is God's minister to you for good. But if you do evil, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is God's minister, an avenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil. Therefore you must be subject, not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. For because of this you also pay taxes, for they are God's ministers, attending continuously to this very thing. Render therefore to all their due, taxes to whom taxes are due, customs to whom customs are customs, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. And we'll get into this more next week, so I'm just wanting to touch on a few things to lay out some points here. One of them in here, you must be subject, pay taxes, for they are God's ministers attending, render therefore to all their due, taxes to whom taxes are due, customs to whom customs. What does this mean, render customs to whom customs is due?
Paying the government to take care of us.
Paying the government to take care of you? Does everybody get that? Or think it may be something different? Because a lot of words have different meanings, and the meanings aren't even close. Like, we talk about a certain custom of a person wearing something or not wearing something or doing something, or a custom with their life. This custom here is referring to taxes, to paying. It's a toll. An end, termination, whether of time or purpose, denotes a secondary significance. What is paid for public ends, a toll, a tax, custom. Matthew 17:25, Romans 13:7, custom. In Palestine, the Herods of Galilee received the custom. In Judea, it was paid to the procurator for the Roman government. So I just want to mention this so we don't get this custom. The custom here and tax is the same. And to tie in with that, years and years ago, when I was in the flower business, and I was with one of the vendors in Miami, Dole, the food company, and they took us to the Miami airport because they had their own facility there, and they might get in 2,000 or 3,000 boxes like this size each shipment of different flowers from South America, and they had a customs inspector there, a customs inspector. And I was asking the customs inspector, so what are you doing? Are you checking like randomly if drugs come in these boxes? And he said, no, we're making sure we get our tax. They didn't care what was in those boxes. They wanted to make sure that every box that came through, they were getting their tax collected on that. And so, just so people wouldn't misunderstand, Paul uses both words, the taxes and customs. We'll end it there this morning, and we'll start again in chapter 13 and break this down verse by verse a little bit more. Yes?
I was just thinking this just a thing. A lot of what Paul is saying here is the exact opposite of how the Jews would have been living under the Romans for time before Christ and then during Christ's life. They would have been doing the things opposite, trying to find the ways around taxes, trying to hating the tax collector and all these different things. So a lot of what he's talking about is, I believe, to the Jews, also to the Gentiles, but to the Jews, like, this is the opposite of what you have been thinking was right for a long time.
And when you say that, I find it interesting thinking of people want God when they want him, and they don't want God when they don't. And to pick and choose this kind of thing, because the Jews here would have complained about injustices against them, but you go back 500 years, like we're reading about with Jeremiah, and they were all corrupt. The kings, the priests, extorting money from people, doing everything that was wrong. The Jewish people were worse than the Roman government at that time. So I'll leave that for you to think about. I thank you for your comments.